The reason I wanted to record this video is because I was having a great hair day and then I just had a really long phone conversation and now I don't know what's happening, but I'm still recording the video. It's not the same. My first podcast recommendation is Bookworm. I love to listen to book podcasts because it not only gives me recommendations for books, it makes me sound really smart because I can figure out how to actually talk about books without sounding like not smart. These are author interviews, which it's like my guilty pleasure is just to like listen to authors talk about their books. It's weird for me. I'm like living vicariously through them because that will be me one day. On Bookworm, Michael Silverblatt is the host. Now, when you first listen to it, I want you to just please have an open mind because Michael Silverblatt is my new bestie. I'm gonna probably email him and see if I can like make him lunch or something so we can hang out and stuff, but his voice is a little weird. I'm not sure if he's aware of it, he hasn't addressed it, and that's just how he talks, okay? Just get over his voice. I would imitate it here, but then I feel like if he ever saw me imitating him online, then he wouldn't become besties with me. They're about 30-minute episodes, and he interviews all kinds of authors, but for the most part, literary novels, the literary novelist is who he's interviewing. They are really intelligent interviews, and he like doesn't leave any room for response. Like it really feels like an interview. He is ready with questions, and he's been called the best reader in the 21st century or something like that. He's famous for being a good reader, and I have gotten book suggestions from this podcast and I love them. My second podcast recommendation is also a book podcast, more author interviews. This is called Between the Covers. The host for Between the Covers is named David Naiman, and he just seems like such a cool guy. He always asks questions of the authors that make the authors say, "Oh wow, I'm so glad that you noticed that." So he seems to really engage with what he's reading and ask intelligent questions. I've also gotten a lot of great book recommendations from the show Between the Covers. However, I will say that not every book that he's talking about or every author he's featuring on the episode is something that I would want to read. It's just like personal preference. However, with Bookworm, 90% of the books that he talks about are ones that I would definitely be interested in. Both are excellent podcasts. The next show I'll tell you about is Magic Lessons. I have no doubt that you know who Elizabeth Gilbert is. She is the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and she has been on this sort of tour over the past few years talking about creativity and where people get creativity and how people can cultivate creativity in their lives. Elizabeth Gilbert is like so cool. She's so like authentic, and she is such a good listener. I swear she should be a therapist if she wasn't a writer. She wrote a book called Big Magic, which I highly recommend to anybody who is interested in the arts. And she created this podcast called Magic Lessons, where she takes the same concepts that are in the book Big Magic, but she goes over them with specific people, artists who want to fulfill some sort of creative endeavor in their life, but they feel kind of stuck in some way. And she takes those concepts to teach them and kind of works with them, and you see these people grow and blossom, and it's really amazing. Not only is it exciting to hear about someone else's story, but it's really designed in a way so that you can take those lessons for yourself. You can get the magic lessons. You get it? The next podcast is one that is probably very well known, especially in the vegan community. It's the Rich Roll podcast. Rich Roll is an endurance athlete. He's a triathlete, and he quit his job as a lawyer to pursue this path of endurance sports. And then along the way, he became fully plant-based with the rest of his family, and he is also a recovering alcoholic, and he has such an interesting story that he wrote about in his book Finding Ultra, which I read the book Finding Ultra way before he even had a podcast, and then I came across his show when he was only on his second episode, so I have been listening from the very beginning. I've been a huge fan. He has a show once a week, I believe, where he interviews someone. He likes to bring to light people that maybe you don't even know about, and he also interviews famous people. in the realm of creativity and athleticism and spirituality and veganism and nutrition, and there's lots of doctors that come on. It's really kind of like your one-stop shop for like well-being and improving your life, and that's kind of the premise of the whole show. I really love what his whole family stands for. My favorite episodes are when his wife comes on, because they have these really intimate talks about life-changing topics, and I love, you kind of feel like you're a fly on the wall. You can kind of listen in on their conversation and their relationship. It's a really amazing show. I recommend it for anyone who would like specific episodes. If you would like to learn about the plant-based diet from a doctor's perspective, or you want to learn about be inspired in endurance sports, things like that. It's such a motivating show. Every time I listen to one of those episodes, I am motivated to become a better person. The next podcast is Food for Thought with Colleen Patrick Goudreau. Another one of my besties. Colleen has been a huge factor in who I am today as a vegan. I became plant-based for not ethical reasons at all, and then the seeds were planted by like YouTube videos that I watched about 4 years ago, and then when I started listening to Colleen Patrick Goudreau's podcast, Food for Thought, I completely changed. I gained a new vocabulary for what it was like to be someone who cares about animals and have true compassion, and like truly exercising your compassion, and not just saying that I'm a compassionate person, but like what does it truly mean to live a compassionate life. And oh my gosh, she's made for me. She's so bookish. She's a film nerd, and she loves like classical music, and she's so eloquent, and she's really into languages, and she knows Italian, and she's an incredible chef. She's like so accomplished. She can be a little intimidating at times, because she's the kind of person who's like up at 5 every morning and like work. But her content that she creates is so effective. Like, she does this thing where she reads love letters that listeners have written into her, just talking about how her work has changed their lives, and it's really motivating to know that you're listening to a show that is like, it's opening people's eyes, like helping them see why we need to care about certain issues. And she does a great job at answering questions that everyone has for vegans. Where do you get your protein? What about leather? Why is milk bad? How do you live without cheese? You have questions about veganism, this is the podcast for you. It has everything. In certain times of my life, sort of off and on, just based on my financial situation, I have been able to support her through Patreon, which has been such a pleasure, because she truly has given me so much in my life. So it has been great to be able to give back when I can. I can't always afford to, but it's really cool to like support a show that I know is making people vegan. Like, that's awesome. The next episode I will talk about is called The Liturgist Podcast. The Liturgist is kind of hard to explain. It doesn't really fit into a certain category, but it's amazing. Like, I discovered this show maybe a year ago, and then around the same time I realized that a lot of people in my friend group were listening to it also, and so we had a lot to talk about. So the Liturgist, they take a topic every week, and they analyze it and talk about it from the perspective of faith, science, and art. People from all faith backgrounds listen to the show, like atheist, Christian, Muslim, everything. Like, you don't have to have a certain faith to listen, but it is from, I believe it's mostly from a Christian perspective, but with caveats. You have to listen to the show to fully understand it. I would recommend going all the way back to the beginning, to episode 1, where it was less produced. Still, every episode is amazing, but like in the very beginning, their first episode's about creativity, and then just go along, you learn more about their life. The 2 main hosts are Michael Gungor, who is an amazing musician. You have to check out his band Gungor with his wife, who also makes appearances onto the show, and Science Mike. They call him Science Mike because he's very sciencey, and he has a way of like really explaining science, especially neuroscience, in a palatable way. One specific episode I think you would be interested in is about the Enneagram, which is a type of personality test, and it's talking about 9 different personality types, and I think you guys might be curious about it, because there's so many, I don't know, so many people out there who's like really interested about learning about who they are and how they see themselves in the world. There's one episode called Woman, basically about feminism, which please give it a shot. Like, it's a holistic view from so many different perspectives about feminism. Their episode called Black and White Racism in America specifically identifies racism between white people and African American people, and my husband and I have listened to that episode I think 4 times. It's so good, and we learned so much, and it's been so much a part of our own awakening. Highly, highly, highly recommend this podcast. The next podcast is called Strangers. Now, this is another big one. It's very likely you have heard of so many on this list, but I'm hoping that there are some new ones for you. These are just some of my personal favorites. Strangers is stories. It's stories from strangers. That's kind of the idea. The idea is like creating empathy through storytelling. The host is Leah Tao. For real, I'm going to email her. I really just want... The content she creates is so powerful. Almost every single episode I've ever listened to of Strangers, I have bawled like an idiot in public. I'm like, oh, I'm just driving to the farmer's market, no big deal. What? Screaming at the car, like, why? What's happening? Like, it's just some just mind-blowing stories, and always create empathy and always change perspective. The thing I really love about Leah Tao is that she's so good about not ignoring other people's ideas, even if they're radically different from her, politically, religiously, or anything. Like, she is so willing to hear anyone's story, and I think that sets an amazing precedent for her listeners to be willing to talk about issues openly, even if you know you disagree. And I guess there's a really active Facebook page that she mentions a lot. I don't use Facebook very often, so I haven't gone on, but I guess the listeners interact there a lot. I just listened to the episode called The Truth. Oh my gosh, so good. You have to listen to it. The last episode I'm going to recommend is a little silly, and it's a little behind the times. It's Gilmore Guys. This podcast is huge. It kind of has an interesting story. It's just 2 guys talking about the show Gilmore Girls. I'm a huge Gilmore Girls fan, so it was obvious that I would listen to it. My friend Summer told me about it, and I was like, oh, that sounds very weird, and I listened to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're hilarious. Basically a comedy show. That's basically what it is, but with some, film talk, which I don't listen to a lot of comedy podcasts, but this is totally worth it for me. It's 2 guys talking about Gilmore Girls, and what they do is one guy is a super fan. He's been watching it since it was on the WB and then the CW, and the other guy has never seen it before. So they started from episode 1, and every episode of the podcast, they talk about an episode, and they have guests on the show, which, to be honest, I don't really like when guests come on the show. I prefer just them talking about it, but, they do what they want to do. You can hear them in the very beginning of the podcast. They're like joking, like, haha, what if the show became really popular? Because they started with like nothing, like they didn't have a huge following, and then now it's so popular. They do live events. It like got so huge, and then in the revival of Gilmore Girls, they even had cameos in the show. So they talk about each and every episode, and they get really long. Like they have this one that's like over 5 hours long of them just talking about Gilmore Girls. If you're a super fan like I am, you'll totally love it. Personally, I have not listened to every episode of Gilmore Guys. I just don't have time for that, especially because I want to watch the episode of Gilmore Girls and then listen to it so I can follow along and remember what they're talking about. But if you're interested in Gilmore Girls and you just want something to laugh to, something to lighten the mood, it's really funny. They're critical of the show, but in a positive way. So they like the show, they just have critical things to say about it, which is, I think, really healthy. Oh, no, you know what? I have a bonus podcast for you, because it's one of the best podcasts on iTunes. It's called Earth to Us. Have you heard of it? It's pretty amazing. This podcast is hosted by moi and mon ami, Evan Oliver. Evan and I basically just take a topic every week and talk about it, and we have a wide range of topics. We cover, sexuality as women, or domestic violence, or even skincare and body products, trade not aid, gentle parenting, homeschooling and unschooling. We talk about all sorts of things. What I love about our show, and I mean, I wouldn't create content that I wouldn't personally love, something that I would want to watch, something that I wouldn't want to listen to. What I love about it is that, yeah, we're vegans, but we're talking about things that not all vegans talk about. I honestly feel like a lot of vegan content online can kind of be the same thing over and over, and Evan and I have been really adamant about, like, we're talking about things that people should be talking about, or like we're talking about things that we really care about, not just because, like, oh, everyone's talking about this, we should do this because people will click on it. Some of the topics might not be something that you think you're interested in, but these are things that we're interested in, and we're very selective with our content. We're not just we don't put up episodes like every single week because we only want to put up episodes that, like, we have the time to, like, make the episode really good and talk about topics that we care about. So check out our podcast. Thank you so much for watching all of these podcast recommendations. I would love to hear your podcast recommendation, and when you give me your recommendation below, please don't just say, listen to this show, you'll love it. Like, tell me why I'm gonna love it, because I only have so many minutes to put earbuds in my ear. I'm pretty selective about what I listen to, so, like, tell me, why is this show gonna change my life? I love to hear new podcasts. And yes, I also love This American Life and Serial and The Moth, obviously. There's a lot of big ones that I love, but these are I just picked some of my favorites right now.